Genesis chapter 31. Now Jacob had heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has acquired all his wealth. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Now the truth is, Jacob had not taken anything that belonged to Laban. Rather, it was that his wealth was increasing faster than Laban's wealth. The problem wasn't that Jacob stole it, it was that Laban's sons were filled with envy. And this is one thing envy does. Envy distorts the truth. It distorts the truth that Jacob, inasmuch as he had not taken anything of Laban's, but envy made his sons tell lies. And Jacob, looking at the countenance of Laban, Jacob saw that it wasn't favorable towards him because the sons of Laban, they've poisoned the mind against Jacob. Previously, we read in the previous chapter, especially in Genesis 30:34, you could see that Laban was pleased with the agreement he had with Jacob. But envy came in, and Laban's countenance changed towards Jacob. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. Now, even if Jacob wasn't aware of it, God had prepared him for this time. God gave him the desire to go back home. Genesis 30:25. Then, given his present circumstances, things became unbearable. So it was time to go back. So the Lord gave him direction. Said, Jacob, today you have to go back home, And the Lord promised it was going to be with him. So this was the most important aspect, that the Lord was going to be with Jacob, and the Lord being with him was a sure guarantee that Jacob could go and have peace going back. So Jacob went and called Rachel and Leah to the field, to his flock, and said to them, I see your father's countenance that is not favorable towards me as before, but the God of my father has been with me. And you know that with all my might I have served your father. Yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said, Thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. And if he said, Thus, the streak shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaks. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. This is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Jacob, seeing what was happening, quickly called his wives, the daughters of Laban, and made them understand the whole thing. And Jacob said something interesting. He said, you know that with all my might I have served your father. With all my might I have served your father. So Jacob acted properly towards Laban. But he also believes that his wives, that is Rachel and Leah, they knew of his righteous conduct. And they understood how unfair Laban had been. Then, and it happened at the time when the flock conceived that I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and grey spotted. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Yeah, I am. And he said, Lift up your eyes and see all the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and grey spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your father. Now arise. So you see, Jacob gave explanation of what happened in Genesis 30. If you read Genesis 30, 37 to 40, you can see that the blessings of the blessed production of sheep and goats, as I said here, you could see it in Genesis 30, 37 to 43. It was revealed to Jacob in a dream. The whole thing was revealed to Jacob in a dream. So Jacob used clever agricultural method, but more importantly, he had the blessings of God. Now, interesting thing, I am the God of Bethel. Now, God told Jacob to go back to Bethel, back to the place where he first encountered the Lord in a personal way. This was Jacob's way of returning to his first love and first walk, as would be later recommended when you read the book of Revelation 2 4 to 5, that we should return to our first love. Every child of God should at some point go back to Bethel. He said, I am the God of Bethel. God introduced himself in this context. So I continue from 14. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and also completely consumed our money. For all these riches which God has taken from our fathers are really ours and our children. Now, then, whatever God has said to you, do it. An interesting thing here is that Rachel's daughter said, is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? So Rachel and Leah, they noted that their father, Laban, had already used every potential inheritance that they could have received. You know, these were things that was meant to maybe kind of like help them, if they decide to return to Jacob's land where Jacob was told to go. So they understood the situation and they were in full support of Jacob, because they said to Jacob that whatever God has said to you, do it. They showed their support to Jacob. It was a costly support, yes, but they totally showed support to Jacob. Now I continue 17. Then Jacob rose and set his sons and his wives on camels, and he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions which he had gained, his acquired livestock which he had gained in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's, and Jacob stole away. Unknown to Laban the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. So he fled with all that he had, and he arose and crossed the river and headed toward the mountains of Gilead. Now, after the conversation with Rachel and Leah, after Jacob explained to them the whole thing, Jacob intended to make a quick departure. He needed to travel as fast as possible. So Jacob was wealthy enough, we could see, that his whole entire family could travel on camel. In that time, that was sufficient wealth, So Jacob had the backing from his wife, so they were ready to leave. So Jacob was not just going to an unknown place; he was headed to the promised land, where God had told him to go to. So now something interesting happened, which you're going to see later. Rachel had stolen the household idol that were her father's. So Rachel stole their household god, their idol. What could possibly have led Rachel to take this idol? Perhaps, she worshipped these idols and did not want to be without them. This were maybe the god they served in Padan Aram, or perhaps she did not want her father to inquire of them, to use the idol as a tool of divination, to catch them, as they may have previously done. If you read Genesis 30:27, so this has some reason why Rachel stole the teraphim. It could also be simply to get back at her father, because she felt the father basically mistreated them. So we don't know, but according to some Jewish tradition, Rachel took the idol, which is the teraphim, because she wanted to keep her father Laban from idolatry. So now the Bible tells us they headed towards the mountain in Gilead. So this was approximately 482 kilometers if you calculate it from Padan Aram to the mountain of Gilead. But the journey was longer and more difficult, physiologically for Jacob. He left the place of safety where he lived a comfortable servitude to go to a place where God called him. But there were many dangerous enemies Jacob would encounter on the way, such as his sworn brother Esau. Now, I continue, 22. And Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the mountain of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, "Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad." So Laban was told this, on the third day that Jacob had fled. He had gone for sheep shearing, but he didn't notice the departure of Jacob and his family for 3 whole days. So Laban decided to go after Jacob. Now, something interesting happened. Now, it was God who told Jacob it was time to go. And God promised he was going to be with Jacob, and God is a God who keeps his promises. So when Laban was on his way chasing Jacob, God came to him in a dream, and told Laban not to do anything harmful to Jacob. He basically told him to be careful in his dealings with Jacob. 25. So Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tents in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched the tents in the mountains. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you've stolen away unknown to me, and carried away my daughters like captives taken with sword? Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me, and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp, and you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. And now you're surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" This was Laban asking Jacob, "Why did you flee away secretly?" Because what he tried to do first was to shame Jacob, with kindness, suggesting that, they would have had an elaborate celebration to like sing them off to their journey. That was the idea. But Laban even showed Jacob that he had the power to do him something bad. This was kind of a threat, talking about his sons and daughter, that is his grandsons and his granddaughters. So he asks Jacob, "Why did you steal my gods?" So this was what Laban ended his question with, to Jacob, accusing Jacob. He knew that his teraphim, that is his idol, were missing, and he had reason to believe that Jacob had stolen them. So Laban's question shows the foolishness of idolatry. It is sad and strange to have a God that can be stolen. Now, 31. Then Jacob answered and said to Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I said, perhaps you will take your daughters from me by force. With whoever you find your God, do not let him live in the presence of our brethren. Identify what I have of yours and take it with you." For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Jacob replied with an explanation for their secret departure. It was simply because he was afraid. Now Jacob thought, if I come to tell you I was living with your 2 daughters and my children, who are your grandsons and granddaughters, you might have maybe taken them away from me. So he was scared. Now Jacob did not have to take the teraphim or the idol of Laban, because Jacob was, the Almighty God was with Jacob. And to this, Jacob was like, with whomever you find your God, do not let them live. So Jacob also did not know that his beloved Rachel stole this household idol, and this was some kind of innocent statement, but pronounced a harsh curse, not knowing that he actually invited judgment on his own precious wife. 33. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into 2 maids' tents, that is Zilpah and Bilhah, but he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idol, put them in a camel's saddle, and sat on them. And Laban searched all about tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me." And he searched, but did not find the household idol. So Laban decided to search. He started with Jacob's tent. He went to Leah's, he went to the maid, Bilhah and Zilpah. He saw nothing. He got to Rachel's tent, but Rachel was smart enough to not stand, making him understand that he was, in she was menstruating. So the father excused that. Now 36. Then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban, and Jacob answered and said to Laban, "What is my trespass? What is my sin, that you have so hotly pursued me? Although you have searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it there before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes, your female goats have not miscarried their young, and have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was. In the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you've changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hand, and rebuked you last night. Jacob was angry, and he confronted Laban and rebuked him. This was stored up anger Jacob had built for as long as 20 years. It was the right time for Jacob to make Laban know how he felt. And he started with asking, "What is my trespass?" Jacob rebuked Laban and made the case known of his innocence, highlighting several examples. It was like, "What part of your household things have you found?" Laban searched and found no evidence of stolen gods of the teraphim, which he accused Jacob of taking. So these 20 years Jacob has been with him, faithfully proved his integrity. Jacob told him that his ewes and his female goats, none miscarried. So this showed you how successful Jacob was in taking care of Laban's flock. He didn't eat any. Jacob did not enrich himself, neither did he feed himself at the expense of Laban's belonging. And even the animals that were torn by beasts, Jacob did not bring it to him. So it was an ancient custom, that a shepherd could not bring torn carcass of a sheep to its owner, as evidence that he was brave enough to not let the wolf devour it or take it away. And this shepherd would be excused. So Jacob explained that he didn't follow this costume, and every animal that was attacked or stolen, he replaced it out of his own hands. Jacob talked about things that were uncomfortable, like droughts consumed him, frost at night, and he didn't get much sleep. To the point that even Laban had changed his wages 10 times. So Jacob repeated unfairness from Laban as his employer. Now, Jacob claimed that it was God's protection that sent him away in a way that prevented Laban from taking what belonged to Jacob. It was God that Jacob saw God's presence and protection in all this, and this is very important. Now, let's continue. 43. And Laban answered and said to Jacob, "These daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these my daughters, or to their children whom they've borne? Now therefore, come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. That they took stones and made heap, and they ate there on the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahaduta, but Jacob called it Gilead. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore, its name was called Gilead. So Mizpah, also Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives beside my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is a witness between you and me. So now you could see they reached an agreement. Laban boldly said that everything Jacob had really belonged to him. Yet, in a supposed act of generosity, he said of Jacob, it is mine, but out of kindness of my heart, I let you have it. Now, in this covenant, Laban expressed how suspicious he was of Jacob. The idea of Mizpah, which translates to watch, is if you do wrong, God will see it and may punish you. That's the concept of Mizpah. In effect, the pillar of Mizpah meant if you come over on my side of this line, the path is void and I will kill you. The covenant breaker would need God to take care of him because the other would shoot to kill. So Mizpah was never meant to be a nice sentiment, despite what a Mizpah coin shared between two people. So you could see the mind of Laban. Then Laban said to Jacob, here is the heap, and here is this pillar which I've placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness that I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of your father judge between us. And Jacob swore by the father of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread and stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. Now you can see something interesting. I will not pass beyond this heap to you. The best solution for Jacob's in-law problem was for him to separate from Laban. Therefore, they set up a pillar to be a barrier between them. Now, there is wisdom in having some separation from in-laws. You know, the Bible says, therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. You can see that in Genesis 2:24. Laban and Jacob seem to have more problems than most families, so their separation was extreme. You know, now after a prolonged deliberation, there was a proper goodbye. Laban saw his daughters and grandchildren for the last time. Jacob took his family to Canaan and never returned to where Laban lived. This is the last we hear of Laban in the Bible, and it is good that this is the end of him. Laban is of the world, and Jacob needed to be free from this world in order to live a wholeheartedly for the God of his father. Laban, rather than seeking to follow the truth of God's plan as witnessed by Jacob, he merely, resented and coveted the blessing of God on Jacob. He finally ended up with neither. His life, is a reflection of sober warning to be a great host, but you're a great host, but at the same time you're not pleasing. Rachel and Leah were wrong to look their father Laban for their portion of inheritance, because once they were married to Jacob, he now wants their portion and inheritance. Since you are saved and joined to Christ, I praise the word and ask, is there yet any portion for me? If you think there is, you are mistaken. So guys, Genesis 31, this is a turning point, where Jacob leaves his deceptive uncle Laban, guided by God's command to return home. It highlights divine protection, the break from an unhealthy family circle and the final separation from Laban through a formal covenant. You can see here God's call, because God told Jacob to go back to the land of his fathers and promises to be with him. The secret departure. So, the secret departure, you can see that Jacob talks to his wives, Rachel and Leah, to agree to leave. They pack up and flee without telling Laban. You could also see theft. Rachel taking Laban's idol or teraphim, and hides them in her camel furniture, basically sitting on them when Laban came to search, which would later be a costly mistake as we read further. And then you could see Laban's pursuit and his confrontation, because Laban chases after Jacob for 7 days, but God warns Laban in a dream not to harm Jacob. And then you could see the covenant at Gilead. Jacob and Laban, they argue and clear the air and made a peace agreement by building a stone pillar which served as a boundary marker. So guys, this is the interesting thing about Genesis 31, the reading of the scripture and the summary. So until the next chapter, may God bless you all. Have a lovely day.